Okay, we are live. Welcome everybody to this edition of the Liberty First Foundation's Roundtable. This week we're just going to have just an open discussion, talk about some of the week's happenings, some of the things that we see going on in the United States. We're going to keep it basically subjects are going to be on the Constitution and gun rights. We'll go through that and we'll see where the discussion leads us. With that, I'm going to go ahead and introduce myself. I'm Michael Marshall. We've got Jeremy Bishop and Michael Vasquez with me tonight. Please join in on our chat. You can post your comments, questions, concerns. Join in on the conversation. That's why our chat's there. It's so that you guys can do your input. Even if you agree with us or you disagree with us, we want to hear from you. Okay, the only way that we can actually start to change things that's happening in the United States if we have an open and honest dialogue, and that means talking to people that we don't necessarily agree with, because we need to know what their sides of positions are, their side of the discussion is, as well as our own. Okay, and we need to have these open debates in order to determine what's actually the best course for the United States. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and let Jeremy and Mike introduce themselves. So let's go ahead and start with you, Jeremy.
Welcome back, everybody. Again, it's me, Jeremy, with Liberty First Foundation, with media and relations with everybody around, trying to bring more people in. Not much beyond that. Mike?
Well, that was quick. I thought you had said a little bit more.
I was trying to pull something up. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
That's right. Now, I'm just trying to link and let people know about us on Facebook and YouTube.
Same.
Political commentator. Always love being here with you guys. Been doing it for about 15 years. Currently under an attack, being attacked. And that's kind of something I want to talk about, the First Amendment, and how just regular average American citizens are being attacked on the social media outlets. And I know everyone's thinking about Elon Musk and how he's going to change everything. And the reality is, since the beginning of the year, as tensions have been going up with Russia and the Ukraine, a lot of people, there have been thousands of people who are being attacked by the social media giants, and their voices have been silenced. And going forward, it's going to scare us. It's going to be something that's going to be really bad. And I'm feeling it right now, quite possibly because I'm stepping up against a college to commit a protest to protect people from critical race theory. And now I'm being shut down. So it's a crazy ride today. It really is. So
Absolutely, the things that we're seeing change every day, and people's mannerisms and the way they behave about things that we say and that we do, and the way that people interpret what we say. It's an insane thing to see, even over the course of the last 15 to 20 years. If you had told me even 10 years ago that we'd be seeing some of the things that we are today, I would have had a hard time believing it. Now that, again, I might not have been as exposed to it as I am now, but 35 years old now, and to think that the way this country is headed, that by the time that I'm in my 50s, we could possibly be in a communist state, it's disturbing to say the least. And to think that even post 9/11, that some of the things that we were exposed to and experienced, I would never have believed that we'd be down the path we're headed right now. And like you guys have both said, is if we're going to make any changes, we got to start now, and we got to do it together.
Yeah, we're almost too late. I mean,
Yeah.
Really, I'm 54 now. My birthday was on the 6th. And by the way, I did a really...
Happy belated.
Yeah, thank you.
Happy birthday.
Thank you. And I did a neat thing. I did a 12-hour live stream, marathon live stream. No, I think I took 2 5-minute breaks, 12 hours straight. It was interesting. But here's the thing. What we have seen in our nation is we have about 6 conglomerates that own almost all the news stations that are out there. We have all of these stations. They own our newspapers. They own the TV, whether it's on cable or regular TV. They own it all. And they have an agenda. That is an absolute fact. We know that. Look at MSNBC talking about the laptop. Look at CNN and the multiple problems they've had that we've seen over and over again. Look at how we're seeing the New York Times and so many other organizations 6 months, 4 months, 2 years after the fact tell us, oh, well, everything we just told you was a lie. It wasn't true. Rachel Maddow and Adam Schiff every night, Russia collusion. There's so many of these things. And so people have come on to this format, like we are, to talk to people about what's happening in our communities, what's happening in our nation, things that are affecting us all. And because we're doing that and we're able to say unapproved thoughts, we're able to say that, in my case, I'm a black conservative Republican, to say that I believe in the Second Amendment. I believe in the First Amendment. I don't believe in critical race theory. And I don't fit into the little check boxes that the progressives would like. That makes us enemies. And they're trying to silence us. They're trying to unperson us. They are trying to demonize us. And if you can't have a nation, not only can you not have a free nation, you can't have a successful nation with that kind of backdrop. That's authoritarianism of the worst order. And that's the future at this point. And I think that's very scary.
Well, we've seen this through our history, okay, or through the history of the world, in various places, okay, including here in the United States.
Mhm.
Okay, one of the biggest things that we can actually say or pull up in the historical record is both Italy and Germany prior to World War II. Hold on a second, I'll be right back.
Oh, yeah. I think where he's going with that is because we saw in Germany and Italy in the 1930s, they were suppressing everyone. They were shutting down all the news media. They destroyed a lot of the printing presses and a lot of the newspapers so that they could control the voice that went out to the public. And that allowed them to really just stomp on people. And how is that different than what we're seeing today? I think that's what where Mike was going, but correct me if I'm wrong. Mike, you were talking about the newspapers.
No, I was actually going right to that.
Yep.
Okay, both Germany and Italy, when they started up their fascist systems, specifically started shutting down any opposing voices. Okay, and we saw the same thing happen in communist China. We've seen it happen in Russia. We're seeing it happen in Russia today, where a lot of stuff that's pro-Ukraine is being shut down in Russia. Now, regardless of where you stand on Ukraine, okay, that really doesn't matter. The thing is, whenever we go to silence opposing viewpoints, you are setting up a system of totalitarianism or authoritarianism, where any opposing voice is not able to voice their concerns or their opinions, is a very dangerous thing. And it leads to a system where you end up with nothing but propaganda. And we're seeing a lot of that happening in Russia. In fact, in Russia, what's happened there recently was a lot of people that were opposed to the Ukrainian war in Russia have been silenced. And now we're seeing a complete shift in Russia of more people supporting the war in Ukraine. That is not necessarily a good thing. Okay. I'm actually opposed to war. I'm not opposed to defending yourself, but I'm opposed to being the aggressor. And the United States has been the aggressor. I'm not going to deny that. In a lot of situations, we have been the aggressors as well as being defenders. But when we look through our historical record and we look at when people try to silence opposing viewpoints, we always see that they tend to be on the wrong side of history. They are the ones that are establishing authoritarian regimes that will do um, ungodly atrocities. And it scares me because some of the rhetoric and dialogue that we are getting today, and this isn't just coming from one side; it's coming from both sides. So don't think that I'm just pointing fingers at one side or the other. Okay, it's coming from both sides. We are getting where we are to the point where we are so divided that we are wanting to completely shut down the other side. And that is a very dangerous thing for our communities, for our lives, for our country, for even for the world. When we get to that position where we are completely wanting to essentially destroy the other side, um, it's a very dangerous situation. We need those opposing viewpoints. We need these open discussions. We need to be able to allow whatever side, whatever opinion there is to be voiced. If we don't agree with it, that's fine. But discuss your disagreement with it. Don't just try to shut it down. Okay. Have a debate with that person. Who knows? You may change your mind. But if you don't have an open conversation about it, you're not going to change anybody's mind. If all you're wanting to do is shut down, all you're going to do is create resistance.
Well, it's a political. This is not just a political tactic; it's a military tactic. And you're right. It is on the right as well as the left. And perhaps I'm more sensitive because I'm having active attacks coming to me personally from the left, and I see evidence of it amongst people I speak with. But it happens on the right too, to a lesser degree, I think. But this is a military tactic. You turn your enemy into an other. They're no longer human. They no longer have rights. They're no longer real. And it makes it easier for you to attack them, to try and destroy them. And that's what we're seeing. We're turning Americans against other Americans because, well, you're on the left or you're on the right. And so if you're on the right, well, then you're some kind of 1930s German. If you're on the left, well, then you're a communist, which isn't always the case.
All right. So
always the case.
It's funny you bring that up. I back in my younger days, I was big time punk rocker. I mean, 13-inch mohawk, combat boots, plaid pants, leather jacket everywhere I went. And as much as I don't care for a lot of their political discourse now, but there's a band called Anti-Flag, and I'll have to one of these times pull up the lyrics, but they talk about that exactly, is dehumanize your enemy so you don't feel bad about what you do, which is exactly what you were just saying. And it just struck a chord with me when you said that, because that song came on, I don't know, I think it was on my way home from work yesterday. And so to hear it brought up now, it's unbelievable how easy it is for them to do that, and how easy it is for them to completely ignore the fact that we're human beings too, and that some people on our side ignore the fact that they're human beings too, and we're all entitled to an opinion. And thank God for the First Amendment, and that we can express our opinions, and how under attack it is, and people don't want to believe it, and how after the First and the Second are wiped away, there will be no constitution. Nobody will be able to say or stop anything, and we'll be like North Korea.
Well, we're closer to that than most people think. Let me give you an example, real world, so that everyone we can talk about it. So I'm putting together a protest. There's an event that's going to be happening in May in a local college in my area. in New York State. They're putting on a CRT, critical race theory event, which they call a racial justice deliberation. They did it in December of 2021. They're doing it again in May. I've made complaints about it. I've argued about it. They don't care. They don't care what my voice is or my arguments are. They're doing it again exactly like they did it in December. When I was making my argument about May and some of the changes, not to silence them, but to make certain changes so it would be inclusive, so that it wouldn't be such a railroad event of this is the only answer you can have on the subject of racial justice. They instead turned around and said to me two things that I thought are terrifying to hear from any college, an institution of liberal thought, or at least is supposed to be. The first thing they said to me is, so do I need to call the police? I'm like, why in the world would you assume that that would be necessary? Because I'm going to have a protest? Why would you need to call someone? That's insane. The second thing I was told, virtually right after they said, oh, we're going to call the police on you, is, well, why don't you just not go? Wait a minute. I have a First Amendment right to protest, and I protest peacefully. And just like people have done 2020, all through 2020, or at least some of the people did in 2020, when it was perfectly fine to do that. But now that I'm saying I'm going to do it because I disagree with them, oh, well, we may need to get police to shut you down, and we aren't going to allow anyone to record the event, even though the first one was recorded. And we're telling you, don't show up, just be silent. Why in the world would I want to be silent for something that I believe is racist, that I believe is detrimental to the community, that I believe is hurting America? And if that's what's being taught, this is coming from the college. Think about what's being taught to the students, and that they're going to go forward thinking this is normal, that I either have to be silent or I'm going to be arrested for letting my voice speak when I'm not saying something they like. That's the reality.
And that's exactly what the Italian fascists did, Mussolini did, was if you voiced any opinion other than what the state was putting out there, you were arrested. You were put in jail. Okay. And in some cases, you were silenced through permanently. Okay. You were killed. The Third Reich was the same way. Okay. And we've seen other regimes that have done this. Che Rivera did it. You saw it in Russia. Okay. Communist Russia. You see it in communist China. If you voice any dissent against the state, you are silenced. Okay, you are either jailed or you are permanently silenced. Okay, with them murdering you, and we are seeing this happen in other countries throughout the world. Okay. We are seeing that happen with the Taliban. The Taliban's doing it in some locations. We are seeing it happen in multiple places down in South and Central America. Some of the banana republics. We see this happen. Okay. And the funny thing is it used to be that the United States was the first to call out these atrocities, okay, the silencing of voices. But we are no longer that, because often we are as guilty of silencing the voices as these other places are. Okay. And that is, again, something that's very troubling to me. We used to be the proponent of free speech. Regardless of what your opinion was, you had the right to voice that. And now we are scared of voicing our opinions because we will be deplatformed, which has happened a lot in social media. We will be threatened with arrest. We will be, I mean, there's numerous things. I mean, though I don't agree with the events that occurred on January 6th
Mm-hmm.
of this year. Okay, primarily the storming of the Capitol building. I do not agree with that. However, I do agree with those people had the right to peacefully voice their concerns of what happened during the election. Okay,
Yeah.
regardless of what side you're on, whether or not you believe the election was stolen, or whether you believe that the election was legitimate. And I've got my viewpoints on that, and I'm not going to get into that a lot on this because, quite simply, that's a discussion for another time. Okay,
Well, we can
but
say
really,
that we should say a judge did come out and say that Mr. Martin, I believe Martin McFadden, was acquitted because while because he was part of a large group of people, several hundred people who'd been arrested that were allowed in. Now there are people who broke the doors, broke windows. That's a crime. They should be charged with that crime. I agree with that. Not not to some extreme insane level, but they should be charged for the crime they committed. The other people, like this gentleman, like a couple hundred other people who were arrested, who were allowed in, did not disrupt or damage anything, and left relatively peaceably, yeah, he should be acquitted. So that should be mentioned as well, so people have a clear understanding of that event versus what the media has told us about it.
right. And the media has portrayed it as everybody that went into the Capitol was there to be violent.
Yeah.
Okay, that they were insurrectionists working to overthrow the seat of government through our legislature.
If it's
Okay,
their
which
narrative.
is okay, even the ones that were kind of violent in that, okay, that did bust through barriers and so forth, that was not their intent. I do not believe that that was their intent. They did want to raise what they believed was legitimate concerns that they had over the election process. Okay, that I do believe.
Yeah.
I don't agree with their methods. I don't agree with their actions. I do agree that they have some legitimate concerns. Okay, and those concerns need to be addressed, and they have yet to be addressed. Concerns of what happened over the election have still, to this day, have not been addressed.
No, they've been swept under the rug.
And that's the problem. If no one's addressing it, there are problems. Yes. It doesn't matter which side you may be on. We can all address and say there are complications in the system at this time. Those complications need to be addressed, and they should be addressed transparently so that everyone can say, okay, we agree on this set of rules or this understanding. We have this resolution process so that we all are on the same page and everyone can say, okay, this is the set of rules. We can live with that. And that addresses the problem. When we don't address it, then it becomes bigger. People become frustrated, and that gives the opportunity for a protest to become a mob, which becomes, or at least parts of it can become violent. And that's kind of what we saw in 2020 with the George Floyd protests.
Well, exactly.
Were
Yeah.
frustrated. No one was listening to them, or they thought they weren't being listened to the way they wanted to be. A small portion of those crowds took the opportunity of that frustration, amplified it, made it violent for their own needs, and then it's now become a mob, and the mob burns down Minneapolis. So the reality happens on left and right, and we should actually treat them both somewhat the same, in that the majority of people really aren't the problem. The big problem is who's manipulating that small group, who's manipulating the crowd, manipulating the emotions, and more importantly, the root is, let's deal with the fact that people feel like they're not being heard, and that government and our media are not being responsive to what their complaints are. That's really the problem at the end of the day.
And actually, I could not agree with you more on that. Honestly, that's one of the biggest problems that we have with getting people to be involved in their governments, is that they do not believe that they're being heard. And they feel like the only way that they can get action or can get their opinions across is to resort to violence, violent means. Okay. And that's on both sides. Okay. And we really need to pause and take a minute and look at that. If we believe that the only way that we can actually solve or voice our grievances and get a redress of our grievances against government is through violent protest, maybe we should really start looking at our government and seeing where the problem is and why we're not being heard.
Well, I think part of that, and I'll ask Jeremy this question because you're the youngest one here. You're the most recently in school, and you have kids, so you can answer this for me. Did you get told the process for an American citizen to complain or speak to their elected officials? Did they ever address what that process is?
Absolutely not. I finished high school in 2005. I didn't graduate. I went back the next year and got my GED, but in high school, due to my punk rock affiliation, I was extremely politically active for my end of it then. But to get the opposite side of it, I took an American history class that was an elective. I took a American problems class, and there was one more. I can't remember where it was. Is as much of an education on the system as you could have gotten in high school at the time. And there was absolutely no discussion of how to raise concern or get your concerns addressed or the process thereof. Or I've learned more from Mike in the couple of years I've known him and the short talks that we've had than I learned through all of high school and all of those classes.
Let me follow it up with another question.
Okay.
For when you're in school, or any kids right now that you're aware of that are in school right now, did they ever explain to you what the First Amendment is?
Oh, no. Now, not for me. There was absolutely no constitutional education throughout any of my schooling. I do know that I don't have them here. Oh, yes, I do. My daughter, my youngest daughter, is in a charter school with a pretty heavy conservative focus, I would say. And they do talk about the Constitution and the flag, and they talk about some of that stuff as well. And I've recently, I don't know if you're familiar with the Tuttle Twins books. Mm-hmm. I've got her, she's read all the Tuttle Twins books, and we talk about stuff like that. And we talk about the Constitution, and we go shooting, and we talk about rights and laws and things that we're dealing with in the birth of America and the current downfall of America we're experiencing. So she'll have more experience, and has more experience now than I ever had all the way into my adult life, into my early 30s when I met Mike and Frank.
Okay. So the reason why I asked that, first, by the way, I've actually done an interview with Connor Boyack, the creator of the Tuttle Twins. He's a nice man, good man. But also, their Mike, I think, is the problem. You and I have a very different experience in school. I remember when I was in high school back in the 80s, mid 80s, that we did have a civics class. I do remember going through the American Constitution. I do remember having a discussion on the First Amendment. And for anyone who's wondering, I think there weren't private schools, or rather, they didn't have the charter schools back then. And my family was relatively poor. I went to public high school, and not the best one. I went to Evander Childs, not one of the best high schools in New York City. And so there was no special emphasis that was given to us that was different than anyone else in New York City. And they still did give us that knowledge, which I think is something that's missing and part of a core reason why people feel so separated from our government and so separated from our freedoms. Because I don't think most people know that our government serves us, and they don't know what their rights are by the Constitution. They actually don't know. They only know what the news media tells them. Oh, you have this right today. It's like, no, you have these rights, and they've always existed from the moment you were born. I think that's one of the root problems, and people need to know, and they need to exercise their free speech to actually speak up.
I was actually very fortunate when I went through high school, and that we did have go through the entire Constitution when I went through my American Civics class. We did go through article by article, clause by clause of the Constitution, and we spent quite a bit of time on it. Went through all the amendments, etc. But I also know that that is not being done in most schools today. There are a few that do at least touch upon the Constitution, but they really don't.
I think that my 19-year-old has actually just got home from work. I'm going to go grab her because she just got out of high school and see if she got any of this education. I'll be right back.
That'd be awesome.
Yeah, because that gives us a real world sense
Mhm.
of this.
Now, I will go on to say that that course that we did go through, still wasn't enough. Okay. Today, I am still constantly learning about the Constitution. In fact, sitting on my desk, I have this book, okay, which is the United States Constitution annotated. And while I don't necessarily agree with some of the annotations in this particular book, and there are other viewpoints on how various clauses are within the Constitution, it is a good place to start, and that's one of the things that I think we need to start teaching our to do is to start.
Okay, so sorry, she just pulled into the driveway. She'll be in a minute.
Okay, so that sounds great. Is
We'll
to
ask her
start
side of the
educating ourselves on how our government is actually supposed to operate, regardless of what party is in power. Okay, because regardless of what party is in power, if our government operates according to the Constitution, like they're supposed to operate, then yeah, our various differences amongst parties can still get put forth their agenda, but they can do it in a constitutional manner and in a manner that preserves the rights of everybody. And that is actually what is supposed to happen. Our government's first priority and our first
Okay.
thing is to actually preserve the rights of the people.
Yeah, Jeremy.
All right. So I got her in here now. I'm trying to figure out where I can hear it at the same time, but I'm not sure I'm going to be able to. So I may just have to put her on, and then I'll have to watch the video later. So this is Mike Marshall and Mike Voss Vasquez. I want to ask you a question about your experience in high school on a specific topic. So I'm going to give you the headset, and it's going to be like one or two questions, and they're going to ask you about it. You can answer them, and then you can go. All right. This is my daughter, Kirsten.
Am I sitting right here?
She's-
Hey,
Hello.
Kirsten.
Hi.
How you doing?
Good.
Oh.
Good. I'm glad to have you with us, and I know you got a busy schedule, so I'll try and make it real quick for you, okay?
Okay.
So you were recently in high school, and
Yes.
wanted to ask you first, when you were in high school, did you ever get taught about our government? Did you ever get taught about how to interact with our elected leaders?
Actually, not really. We took one class, which was a term, and it just taught us about oh, I can't really remember. It's been a couple years. They just taught us about like the red and the blue side, and that was literally it.
The red
And
and
we
the blue.
passed the
So
class.
you mean Republican?
Like
and Democrat?
Republicans and Democrats. So yeah.
Okay, so they told you about the parties. Okay.
Yeah.
The other thing I want to ask you, at any point throughout high school, did they ever tell you about the First Amendment? What is your First Amendment rights? Or for that matter, any of the rights in the Constitution? Did they ever tell you what your rights are?
No, they didn't.
They didn't say anything about the Constitution or the amendment?
They went over like a couple. I know that we did an essay on either the 4th or the 6th. I can't remember, but we did like an essay on one of them, and they went over them, but that was it.
Wow. Okay. It's interesting because my experience with it, I'm far older than you, was very different. Mike's was also a little different. So we wanted to hear what's happening now. And so you're our voice, our touchstone to find out what's happening in the real world today, since I don't think they're going to let me back into high school.
Yeah.
And they shouldn't. So I wanted to thank you for that and try and get an idea. But by the way, do you know your rights now?
No, not really.
Okay. Ask Jeremy.
Yes, I will.
All right.
All right.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, no
Thank you.
problem.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
Is that your headset?
That's my headset?
Is it yours?
No.
It must be my other one.
Mine would be on the ground.
No. All right, I'm back. Sorry about that.
She's
No
tall.
worries. No worries.
Yeah,
No,
she's
thank
about
you for
5'10".
having her come on.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, that's actually very telling about what's happening in our schools, and that's actually that's one of the things maybe we need to actually have a discussion about one of these nights, and maybe kind of touch on it a little bit here, is the fact that government controls our educational curriculum, but why is it no longer being taught that about how our government is supposed to work?
I think I have an idea there, because if we're not telling the youth today what their rights are, every administration, left or right, doesn't matter. Every administration gets to come in and they get to say, these are your rights. They get to reinvent the Constitution or their vision
Yeah.
of the Constitution, so that you only do what they want you to do and you don't step out of bounds. And so it's easy to tell her, if she doesn't know the First Amendment, she doesn't know, especially the First Amendment free speech. If she doesn't know she can speak up, if she doesn't know that that our government elected leaders or elected officials are servants of the public, that they are to answer to us. If she doesn't know that, they can tell her, oh, well, you're mandated. You have to do this. Doesn't matter what the mandate's on. You have to do it because we're the government. We tell you that, and you don't have a right to say anything else.
Right.
That's
We're your boss.
Yeah.
Well, how often do you see it in a political setting, not political settings, in group settings, when people who've never met senators and representatives and things like that, they meet them and they damn near bow down to them like they're some sort of god, and they act like these people are just, the highest of high power. And I don't mean the ones who want something. I mean the ones who've never met one, and they treat them like they are the hottest people on the planet, more so even than celebrities, because they don't understand that those people work for us.
No, think about, I can give you another real world example today. I had in New York State, they gerrymandered all of the districts. For people who don't know what gerrymandering means, it's a term goes back to the 1800s. I think it was 1856. It's the way that they redraw the lines after the census every 10 years. It's based on the population in any state, and it helps decide how many congressmen you have from your state going into Congress. So they just redid that in New York State, which was considered unfair for the most part. So I have this new guy. There's this brand new section of Congress, the New York 22nd District. They redid it. It has nothing to do with my county that I live in. I have had two candidates, and as it so happens, they're both Democrats, that being said. But on Twitter, both of them reached out to me and sent me this automated request, direct message saying, hey, I'm running into the 22nd District. Send me money, help me get elected in office. And my answer to them both were, one, I'm a Republican, so you didn't even pay attention to my Twitter profile. Two, you're not in my district. You're not representing me. And three, you won't answer my questions. When I send them a question, say, okay, you want my money? Here, answer this question about our politics today. And they didn't answer. So I want to know. You want my money, you want my vote, even though you can't get my vote and you're not going to represent me, but you want this money, you want this vote, and you don't even care. You just think I'm going to, oh my God, I got a message from a guy who might be a member of Congress, and I've had it from members of Congress too, saying, oh wow, look, they got in touch with me. That's so fantastic. They don't do that to everyone. Let me give them money and vote for them. I'm sorry. It takes a little bit more than that to get my vote. Like, first of all, answer my question.
The thing is they do that to everyone.
and I
it's
see
a canned message.
Yeah, but there's so many people who go, oh my God, they've reached out to me. They must care. I've known politicians for 15 years. I've done interviews with members of Congress. I've done interviews with presidential candidates, vice presidential candidates for the United States. I've talked to Freedom Medal winners and several high-level politicians across this country. And I can tell you, they're just as much of an idiot the day they get elected as they were the day before and the day after, just like anyone else walking down the street. I've talked to these people. I know them. They're not special.
No,
they just
not.
have an office and they lord it over people. And I've had more than a few times where I've told these, even members of federal government, where I've had to tell them, it's like, you're forgetting. I know you. You don't impress me. The title, I've talked to many people like you. You're not that big a deal. And they stand there and just go, what?
Well, I think it actually, and this is actually going to hit on the conservative side. Okay. I think it was quite telling. Vince, I think it was a couple of weeks ago. Ted Cruz was flying.
Mm-hmm.
And something happened while he's on his flight, and he came back. He goes, "Do you know who I am?"
Yeah, you're an American. Shut up.
Yeah, you work for me.
I'm
Get
sorry.
in line.
You are whoever you are. I don't care. It doesn't matter who you are.
Yeah.
Okay. You don't deserve special treatment because you are so and so.
Especially when you start off with that kind of attitude. I like Ted Cruz most of the time. But you know what? You don't get to speak to me any kind of way just because you won an election. That didn't make you smarter or better or anything else. It just means you had a really good ad with a lot of money. And that's true for Republicans as Democrats and Libertarians alike. You had a good ad with a lot of money. That's what wins elections today. That doesn't mean that you're a good person or you're being effective and efficient, which is my big thing about elections. Never elect anyone who isn't effective and efficient. I don't care what party they're in.
Well,
And-
Makes
I
sense.
agree. Okay, and I also agree that I mean honestly, and I've been raising this concern for quite some time now. Um, our election system's broke.
Mhm.
Plain and simple, it is broke. And you can look at the events of the 2020 election, but I think we need to look back even long before that and realize that our system is broke not because of the way votes are being counted at the ballot box. Our system's been broke by who we are being allowed to elect.
I
Okay.
think I mentioned it.
I mean, honestly, we no longer have a voice in who's put into office. We have a choice of what party we put into office. Okay, you can say, well, you have a voice in primaries. Well, 40% of America does not have that voice because they are not registered with a political party affiliation, so they aren't included in the primaries.
That's a problem.
Um, so right there that's a huge problem. Okay, another problem is, yeah, okay, I go to the primary and I get the top five choices of my party to elect. Okay, that really isn't a voice. Okay, I get to choose between five people that my party said I could vote for. Okay, again, we are a country that is no longer ran by the people. We are ran by the political parties.
Well, let me ask you guys
And
this.
that's really what's how our voice is being destroyed.
I agree. But let me ask you guys this. And I ask this for the audience watching this, whether it's live or afterwards. I want to see a comment on this. Do you think that every newspaper, if every newspaper, every channel, your local TV station, independents like us, that politicians, both parties, should take, let's say, 5 questions from each and every one of them? So every news station, every newspaper, every, let's say, major, say 1,000 subscribers, whatever the cutoff number may be, but every significant uh, um, independent news media, take 5 questions from each and every single one of them, both candidates, both sides, libertarians too, if they're involved, or the Green Party, whoever, and they all have to answer that. They have to answer that before they can get on the ballot. They have to, before November, they have to answer 5 questions from each and every one of those sources so that the public, whether they're looking on the social media or whether they're looking at traditional media, wherever they're looking, they have answers to questions that will be relevant to that election. That would be our voice, First Amendment being exercised. It would give confidence in our votes, and we'd have some idea of who we're electing. And if they don't want to answer the question, well, they'll suffer the consequences from that. Does that? I would like to see that as an election reform. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does,
Absolutely.
with a caveat though.
Okay.
Okay, because regardless of how you take and poise those questions, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
When
that's true.
they're in office, lots of times what they answered during the campaign or what they promised during the campaign is never delivered upon.
Well, that's something for re-elections. That's when, if the media is doing its job, because I've done this many a time, it's like, okay, I do long form. So I remember what people said 4 years ago. I remember what they said 6 years ago. And I bring it up. It's like, okay, I've been doing this 15 years. For a politician to slip something past me, it either has to be pretty obscure or it has to be something from more than 15 years ago for me not to remember what they said. But that's what the media is supposed to do. That's their job. So that's their part of the First Amendment, is their requirement to hold politicians accountable and say, no, 2 years ago, 4 years ago, you didn't do that, or you promised something different. You've changed your position. Whether it's a Mitt Romney saying nine months ago, you're not qualified, Ketanji Brown Jackson, you're not qualified to be on the appellate court. And now 9 months later, he goes, well, but you're perfect for the Supreme Court. You need to explain that reversal, because it doesn't make sense to me. If there's a legitimate reason, fantastic. But his answer is crap. It's politics, because you made a reversal. She wasn't qualified before, but she's qualified now. She hasn't changed. That's just crazy. So that drives me nuts.
And I agree with you on that. And let's actually get into the Supreme Court hearings. Okay. I did a little research while the hearings for KBJ were going on. And one of the things that I decided to do some research on is when did confirmation hearings start becoming commonplace in our in the scheme of things. And did you realize that confirmation hearings did not really become popular until after the 1900s?
I thought it was 1925 or 1935.
Yeah, actually, it's right in there in the 1920s. Prior to that,
I'm a political junkie, so
prior to that, confirmation hearings weren't heard of. Okay, whenever somebody was appointed by the president, there was a debate in the Senate about that person. Okay, and then they took a vote. They didn't hold a week-long confirmation hearing asking questions from all over, which many of the questions that are asked in most of these confirmation hearings aren't relevant to the office they're seeking, that they're being appointed to.
True, but the questions that were asked of Judge Jackson were relevant because they were her words in the courtroom and her courtroom decisions. Now, not all of the questions were relevant in that way.
No, I'm not saying that there weren't any relevant questions, because there were a lot of relevant questions, but there was also a lot of irrelevant questions. That were asked.
Absolutely.
Okay. And honestly, if they're not relevant, I don't even understand. Oh boy. Muhammad M. Chico, sorry, this just got me. Invested a total of $95,000 worth of Bitcoin in an online company. And he's guaranteed a payout of 25% per week. Boy, God. Muhammad, I hope that works out for you.
Yeah, really.
Can you say spam bot?
No, God, so many of them.
So let's get back to
Yikes.
Most of the time, a lot of these questions that are being asked in these hearings aren't even relevant to the office that the person's being appointed to. Okay, they are politically designed to make the person look like they're not qualified. Okay, regardless of whether they're qualified or not. Most times it's a hatchet job. Okay, we saw it during the Gorsuch hearings. We saw it during the Barrett hearings. We're seeing it. We saw it with Kavanaugh. This most recent one. Okay. Um, we saw it with Garland hearings. Okay.
Hmm.
And quite honestly, all these hearings are nothing more than to get sound bites. Okay, plain and simple.
Mhm.
They do nothing really to show how well a person is suited or not suited for the position. They are a place where candidates can gain sound bites so that they can show their base how they're being hard on this particular candidate that is of the opposite party.
Yeah,
And
that was like Lindsey Graham. Do you remember this, Jeremy? When Lindsey Graham, I think this is one of the major ones that stuck out for a lot of people. Lindsey Graham goes and says, "Well, I don't want to pick on you for being a defense attorney, and you were representing the Guantanamo Bay detainees." And then he goes into attacking her about defending the Guantanamo Bay detainees.
Mhm.
That's not relevant.
No.
Her job was to defend them. And I thought that was a bit dishonest because you can't pick on her. That's her field of law. That's what she does. And, you could say there's a dozen different criminals, I'm sure, that she defended that we would all despise, but that's part of our judicial system. That's why we have defense attorneys. And
The same as attacking a public defender for defending a criminal.
yeah,
right.
it's that I thought was out of bounds.
Ridiculous. Yeah.
Yeah,
Forbid they do their job.
and I mean, I really think we need to start looking at the way, honestly, we really need to start looking at the way our Congress is doing their job. Okay, the House of Representatives and the Senate. I really don't believe that they are doing what they are supposed to be doing. In fact, I know they're not. Quite honestly, I know they're not, and it doesn't matter what party they're from. Okay, they are not doing their job. Their job is to legislate. These hearings should be the candidate opening by stating their qualifications and what they bring to the table. Okay, that's what Sapper, and actually,
Oh, hey, Lee. How you doing, Lee?
I agree. Okay, the candidate should, but I'm really calling in question on why we even need these hearings. Tell you the honest truth, we should already know what qualifications the candidate brings. We should already know what they bring to the table. Okay, all that should be known before they're even appointed. Okay, or recommended for appointment.
But it was Ketanji Brown Jackson before she even had the nomination. She was on a list. CNN actually put it together. There was only 11 candidates 11 women that were actually possible. And we already knew about their records. Before the first day she showed up for the hearings, I had already found out that she had in the 9 months that she had been on the appellate court, that she had 3 reversals of her rulings. And specifically, and this is the important thing, the big thing, one of the 2 big things I had against her is each of those 3 overturns were because she overstepped her bounds and became an activist judge, taking on a responsibility she legally did not have the right to do and made a judgment she could not do. That is a fact. It is a judicial statement. And that was a problem. Someone, and I don't agree with someone in the Supreme Court who believes in overreaching the bounds of their position. So we knew that beforehand. And it got completely lost right after the first day. It was thrown out the window. So we do know about these candidates beforehand. And then they throw in things like, did you have beers in high school? Are you too religious? And I even saw things against Justice Barrett where they were asking her, well, are you sure you can be a judge because you have 6 kids and they're mixed parentage, mixed race kids?
Right.
What's
Okay.
that aggravates me.
It should. It quite honestly should. And honestly, I don't think that we need to have these hearings. Quite honestly. Okay, unless there is something really, really, really out there. Quite honestly, when a president appoints a candidate for whatever position, it should go up to the Senate, have a debate on it, and then they have a vote.
Well,
You don't need a week-long worth of hearings. Now, if there is something that is very telling out there, then yeah, we could possibly bring the candidate in, have them to address that particular incident, whatever it is, and then be done with it. Adjourn, go back into debate in the Senate, and go with it. We don't need to have a Senate that is full of nothing but creating sound bites for their next election. And that's literally all these hearings do.
Yeah.
It's a forum for these people to create sound bites for their next election.
Jeremy, what are you thinking about it? You're being all silent over there.
Actually looking at I'm listening. I'm looking at creating new L1F merch. I apologize.
Oh, no worries. But I don't want it to feel like we're silencing you there.
Oh, no, not at all. As Mike knows, your guys' time in this field is timeless in my opinion. And Mike, when did I join? 3 years ago, about?
Yeah,
3 or 4
roughly
years
about
ago.
that.
Kind of when I jumped on board, and then maybe a year or so before that with Religion of Arms and some other stuff that I was doing, which I think Mike was a part of back then at the time. A lot of this, I'm going to be honest, is still educational for me, and I will stray away from answering questions I don't know, but love to bring them to Mike Marshall's attention when they do come up. And so a lot of this stuff is just stuff that I feel like most people my age genuinely, and I say this wholeheartedly, they don't give a shit about. And it saddens me because I have I manage a service center for a Chevrolet dealership. I have myself 4 service advisors, 2 mechanics, and 13 lube techs that I manage. And of all of those people, 2 of them actually care about this stuff, and the rest of them couldn't care less. And I probably couldn't convince to stop by and say hello one of these nights. And seeing the changing of America and the lack of education and people who not only are they ignorant to what's going on, that they genuinely don't care, and it's sickening.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Well, it is.
well, I was going to say it's interesting that I think you're absolutely correct, Jeremy, that we see that a lot in America today. That's why, since at least that I'm aware of, since the 1950s, the number of people who actually vote in elections has been going down in every election, even presidential elections, with the exception of 2020, the most secure election that has ever existed in the history of the United States and mankind.
Oh, yeah.
So, and if you can't hear the sarcasm there, it's a hint. But looking at that, we've seen apathy has been growing, and I think politicians are taking advantage of that. And and that's why we see so many sound bites, especially with Supreme Court justices, especially when we see the elections. We hear plenty of sound bites, and we see lots of catchy ads, but we don't really see substance, and that's why we're going downhill. The reason why we became a service economy is because Barack Obama promised America that he was going to transform America. My thing back in 2008 was transform it to what? You didn't finish the sentence. There's a part in there you left out. Transform it to what? Where are we changing from into? And now
Well,
we see the result of that. And I think that's scary. That should scare people.
correct me if I'm wrong. I believe I've heard Mike and Frank talk about this. The U.S. was founded as a constitutional republic, right?
No,
No. Okay.
no. Originally, it was not founded as a constitutional republic.
Oh, wait a minute.
Okay.
Wait a minute. That's the it's the thing before we had that. There was the Federation, or was it the
It
League?
was. We were a confederation.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. Originally, the United States was founded under the Articles of Confederation.
Oh, you're right. Okay.
Okay, and each state was actually its own sovereign, in a sense, nation.
hmm
Okay, even though that they were called states, they were essentially their own independent nation. And through the Articles of Confederation, they joined together to become the United States.
So what I wanted to bring up with that is so we went from there and then eventually turned into a constitutional republic. But
Yes.
what I've seen since the beginning is this, and maybe I'm wrong. And let's skip a few years. Let's skip to Civil War, right? Civil War happens. All of a sudden, there's a lot of fallout. There's a lot of political discourse, a lot of back and forth nonsense. But then there's a sense of unity, kind of gets a little better, and then things get worse. And it seems like, let's take World War One. Okay, yeah, go America, unity, everything starts to get better, and then after that, it gets worse. World War II, same thing. Vietnam, same thing. But as we experience these tragedies, every time after a tragedy or during a tragedy, it's everybody unite, all Americans for all Americans, blah, blah, blah. And then after the fact, we go from here to here, then here to here, then here to here. And every time there's something going on, we fall farther off the other end of the map. And it makes me wonder what's going to happen after this whole Russia-Ukraine thing. Let's say, and God forbid, let's say World War III starts. There's not much more we have to fall off of this side after something like that would happen. We've already been pushed so far. And the amount of change that we're seeing. But it's in my experience that after something crazy, after we pretend that we're unified for just the shortest amount of time, after that fact, we just completely fly off the handle again.
I have bad news for you.
Okay.
And this is kind of what Sapper is addressing here, that Americans don't count until it hits our pocketbooks.
Mm-hmm.
The problem that we're facing right now isn't World War III, because it's highly unlikely.
Okay.
Because there's nothing unifying the forces that would be involved in that. It's far more terrifying and more realistic that we're looking at probably 3 simultaneous regional wars. We're talking about China with Taiwan and Southeast Asia. We have North Korea going after Japan and South Korea. We possibly, and with some influence, if not outright warfare, with Iran trying to take over the Middle East. And then we have the region with Russia and its actions now with the Ukraine, but also possibly going into probably the pre-Baltics. That would be Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania. That would probably be its next step. So imagine we can't handle Afghanistan and we armed the Taliban. We can't handle Ukraine. Imagine having simultaneously under this same government or a similar government, having those three regions with those major powers all happening at the same time, and an army that has just has missed its recruitment numbers. We have reduced our readiness standards. We are trying to appease our military and not maintain the higher levels that we've always had, with leadership like General Milley, who are more than happy to go and tell our enemy secrets and information they shouldn't know, like telling the Chinese that what's going on in Russia so they can turn around and tell Russia what we know about what they're doing. So that's the worst scenario. And it's a realistic one. And if that happens, America doesn't survive.
Well, and I've heard them saying, this whole Russia-Ukraine thing is probably just really a big cover for the China-Taiwan thing. And to be fair, I have, for a long time, I was off of Facebook, so I didn't hear a lot of political stuff. I looked for up what I could, found out what I could, listen to, KNRS radio, things like that, who doesn't cover a lot of it, but covers enough. But this is the first I've heard of the you said Iran Middle Eastern takeover. First I've heard that. First I've heard of a potential North Korea going after Japan and South Korea. Makes sense. Makes a lot of sense, and it is scary accurate. But first I'm hearing of it because the mainstream media hides it.
Do you know that North Korea, since January, has fired 9 hypersonic missiles and 1 ICBM?
Yes.
Do you know that in Iran, they are building an ICBM? They are building an ICBM so that they can hit the United States and Israel, and they're going to use any funds that come from the Iran nuclear deal to be able to both bolster their global terror division in the Islamic Revolutionary Guard and to build these missiles, which is allowed by the Iran nuclear deal, which is why Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates are screaming as loudly as Israel is to say, don't do this. So that's the Middle East, and that's why that's a problem. You have North Korea, which is firing the hypersonic missiles within 300 miles of Japan. And that's flying right over South Korea.
Didn't they just prototype one that could definitely hit anywhere in the U.S.?
That was North Korea. Yes, 13,000 miles. It can hit anywhere in the United States, and they have a better missile after that one. Mm-hmm. And then you have China, who gave North Korea the hypersonic missile technology, and they've tested 2 missiles. They're making inroads to take over the Red Sea and looking to attack Taiwan. We don't have American citizens that are dedicated enough to this nation. If you listen to 36% of the youth today, that's those who are 30 and under, believe in socialism. We have the Democratic Socialists of America, who are promising to destroy the Constitution and reinstitute America. This is not we are not strong, and we have a leader that obviously doesn't know how to lead, at least the military at the very least. So that terrifies me, because I don't believe these people can win that kind of war or that kind of scenario. We should all be very, very terrified. So the pendulum has to swing very quickly, very soon. And the First Amendment is probably the first step, realizing our rights. The First Amendment, holding politicians accountable to be effective and efficient, is the first step in that pendulum swing. Because if we don't swing it back, Russia is already destabilizing the United States dollar by using the ruble. And if we don't see the world use the dollar, we only have 2 legs that America stands on. We're a superpower, and the world economy is based on the dollar. You start taking those 2 away with a military that's not secure, and we fall quickly. And that's, I hate to be negative about it, but that's reality. I'd rather people be prepared.
Well, there's such a major problem today with people saying things like, well, now we're not telling this to scare you. No, we are. Wake up. It's time to listen.
I absolutely agree. I mean, this is stuff I've been following for quite some time in great detail for God.
Well, and
Years.
Sapper brings up a good point.
He does.
Okay. Yeah, we're not playing with countries that really can't do a lot to us. Okay. These are countries that can bring the hurt
Mhm.
if they
These
want
are-
to.
Other
these
major powers.
Yeah, these aren't the Taliban.
No.
2,000 Taliban. We're talking about China with the largest largest standing army. North Korea, the second largest standing army in the world.
Mhm. And people blind themselves to the fact that, oh, it's just North Korea, it's soldiers on the ground, but it's not. These are their militaries, believe it or not, are highly technologically advanced militaries, and they have the power, like you said, to put the hurt on us. And people think, oh yeah, what was that that movie back in
I will be right
what was
back.
it? Mid early 2000s, Team America World Police, and they think that we're just going to go in, boots on the ground and end everything in one fell swoop, and they don't realize that these people don't even have to get up from their computer chairs to push the buttons to end the world, and they'd be glad to do it at the drop of a hat.
But see, I don't, and everyone thinks it's all about the technology. Sapper will agree with me, and I know who Sapper is. Good person, good man. And he knows firsthand and far better than I do. And I will defer to all veterans always. But in my military experience and in my understanding of the world, if you have soldiers on the ground, you can take anything. Yes, it's great to have all the electronics, and we have a lot of doodads, and we're talking about cyber warfare, and that's all wonderful. And then when you put a soldier right there on that, when that soldier takes that building, you're done. And we aren't training for that. We're training for, they're going to use their computer. No, they're going to send a guy over with a gun. And that's the problem. And we're not ready for that.
Well, in 1 second, and I'm just going just 10 feet away, and I'll be right back. But
Sure.
I have a point to make.
Okay. Well, so I know, and Sapper is correct. A few missiles, and they can take out our ports. There's only three. Our electric grid is literally 3 points. There's 3 hubs, and you take out the entire electric system in the United States. Electronic warfare isn't the biggest thing. It's really about having a soldier to protect that land. And we're not training our people to do that as effectively as we used to. And we have leaders who don't realize that and, quite honestly, don't care. Biden, you never leave. We left hundreds of thousands of guns, tanks, ammo. We turned the Taliban into an army, literally the first terrorist army of the world. You don't do that. There are 9,000 Americans still in Afghanistan to this day. And we haven't gone and gotten them back home, which aggravates me. I'm incensed by that, and the media has just let them go. When we have these kind of leaders that will do those kinds of things, we don't want to be in a war. Not with them.
So
this isn't the first time that we've turned an enemy into an army.
Not like this.
Well, go ahead, Mike, and then I'll go back to what I was going to say.
Mike's going to pull
Hold on
up
a second. I'm looking up something. So go ahead,
Oh,
Jeremy.
well, okay. So what I was going to say is there, and of course I had to get the most colorful one I have, but there are far too many people today who think that these are toys and range toys, and they're for fun, and they're for hunting and shooting rabbits and shit like that. No, this is your natural born given right as a United States citizen, and this is your ticket to the Constitution and keeping the Constitution if you want to keep your freedom. And when it comes down to eventually one day possibly getting boots on the ground and people in the United States, it's going to be people like the Minutemen who are willing to say, no, we won't stand for it. This is ours, and we need to defend it with our lives. And there are too many people who just want to say, oh, you don't need those. You don't need those. Well, why is, Zelensky throwing everything he has to his citizens to save their asses?
Because you do need it.
You do.
Because if you
Absolutely.
don't have it,
This is not for fun at the range. The
No.
time at the range is to make you good with this.
and
Well-
they have it because since they didn't have that right of Second Amendment like we do, that gave more power to Russia or to some bad guy to come in and say, oh, well, we're just going to take what you got because you can't defend yourselves. Again, it comes back to our rights. We have to understand what they are, and we have to exercise them vocally, viscerally, and stand up, because we can't trust every politician, especially when we're not paying attention to what these politicians are saying and doing, especially when they're not effective or efficient. My opinion.
Yeah, Sapper, I can agree with that, actually.
Well,
Well, no, I would say that I
Well,
wouldn't, but
A lot of people, here's something that is very relevant to this conversation, and it's something that a lot of people do not realize or even understand. Japan did have means to come on to the North American continent. In fact, they did try. They tried very, very hard to establish a foothold on the North American continent. However, what stopped them was armed civilians.
yeah.
Okay.
To paraphrase,
During
behind
World War
every
II,
brave crash is a
Japan
weapon.
assaulted the Aleutian Islands. I mean, they threw tons and tons of troops, bombarded planes, tanks, everything, and they were not able to establish foothold. And it wasn't the U.S. military that stopped them; it was armed natives that stopped them. Okay, we don't realize that our Second Amendment is about a whole lot more than just the right for the people to keep and bear arms. The Second Amendment is actually there as a national security device.
Yeah.
We used to have both organized and unorganized militias in this country, and that is what actually allowed us to defend ourselves during the Revolution. It allowed us to defend ourselves during the War of 1812.
Mm-hmm.
It also allowed areas under U.S. protection to be able to defend themselves when troops were engaged elsewhere. And honestly, if a war does pop out where the United States is involved with another one of the major superpowers, and there's a lot of countries that could bring a hurting on us that we don't even think about. One of them is India.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. We're on good terms with India right now, but India gets all of its armaments from Russia. So India's not going to bite the hand that feeds them if it comes down to it. And India has some very good capabilities, and they've got an extremely large army.
Yeah.
Then you've got China, you've got Russia, you've got essentially a good portion of the Middle East that is also anti-American. And if it ever did come down to it, we could face a scenario where we do have conflict coming to this country. And we've always thought that because we are surrounded by two vast oceans, that we are safe. Well, the world's gotten a whole lot smaller since World War II. Yeah, that was part of our protection during World War II, and maybe even been part of our protection during Korea and Vietnam. Today, that doesn't stand. And
No.
actually, even in World War II, we had U-boats off the East Coast that,
Mhm.
I mean, honestly, if Germany or Japan, if a couple things would have went differently for either one of those two countries, we very easily could have been fighting on our shores.
I believe
There were several engagements in California against the Japanese Navy that is not told
I'll be right
in
back.
common history.
Well, as I
Um,
remember, no, I was just going to say, I remember that wasn't there a German U-boat that was sank off the coast of Virginia? I think they were about 50 miles out of the coast of Virginia.
Yeah.
And people don't know about it. I think it was U-562, if I remember it correctly. It was a German U-boat right off Virginia, and they had U-boats just outside of New York's the Bay in New York City.
And I mean, we really do not understand just how close we were to having actual war here in the continental United States.
You know what I
Off
think?
both coasts.
You know what I think, Mike? A lot of people don't realize this. The very first line of defense for America, national security, is our leadership, having a strong leadership, which imposes on the rest of the world because we have technology, we've got money, we've got the resources and the manufacturing capability, even though it's been scaled down, it still exists that we can ramp up as fast, if not faster, than almost anyone in the world. We've got the technology to make the most of all of that ramping up. So if we have a strong leadership that says, hey, I can get these people ramped up immediately, it keeps the rest of the world calm, helps keep them quiet. Another part of that national defense that is essential, I believe, is the fact that we are armed as American citizens everywhere. And so there is no spot like the Aleutians, like what we saw in the Caribbean, in the Samoan Islands, everywhere there's Americans, an American Second Amendment, that is a hard target for anyone who would want to come to America because there is no safe space they can just jump into and go, there's no one armed over there. We can take that as a beachhead. That's our second and probably most critical line of defense is that Second Amendment telling them they can't just walk in. They can't do what they did to the Ukraine as an example, where they surrounded it and said, hey, they don't have arms. We can roll in on the eastern portion, swing down to the south, and the people don't have the arms to stop us because we didn't start sending them arms until February, and they were already in the eastern portion of the Ukraine.
They're already
in the southern. They had already made their beachhead. They already got what they wanted, and it was just a matter of, and if we didn't get them those arms, those M16s in fast enough, the Russians would have rolled all the way through Kiev. It was only until we armed the populace that they start slowing down. People have to realize the Second Amendment, like our First Amendment, are critical to our ability to keep ourselves safe and keep our enemies at bay. And when we start whittling them down, we're opening up the door for someone to say, now's my shot. Let me see if I can make it, because they're weak.
Oh, I want to bring attention to Sappers 194th. This comment, like New York City and Chicago. There are a lot more people armed in New York City and in Chicago, both. They may be armed illegally, but there are a lot of people that have weapons in both of those places that could put up a hell of a resistance to any type of invasionary force. We look at a lot of places that have these very strict gun laws, and we don't realize that even with those strict gun laws, they don't stop the gangs from having guns. They don't stop the criminals from having guns. Okay, what they do stop is the law-abiding citizen from having guns. So even if we look at places like Los Angeles, which California has horrendous gun laws as well, we would see that there are still a very heavily armed contingent in those areas. They may have guns illegally and in violation of certain state laws that have been enacted, but we do have a lot of weapons. How many? Let's bring up this
165 million gun owners, 350 million guns are estimated. And looking at the gun laws in the United States over the last 3 decades, they have not red flag laws, New York Safe Act, HR 127, and all the bills similar to that, 22,000 bills. And they have not one of them has been effective or lived up to any promise that has been made, according to the FBI data, according to the New York GIVE report, according to similar reports in California and every other state. I read them every year.
Well, the gun laws, and we've all been saying this for forever and ever, is they only affect law-abiding citizens. Criminals are criminals for a reason because they don't obey laws and things of that nature. And these laws only hurt us law-abiding citizens. Now that brings up a question that I thought about. And without disclosing if you do or do not own any firearms, and that's nor the point. Let's say that you do own firearms in somewhere like New York where it's hard to get them, and your neighbors came to you. Let's say it's a good neighbor. It's a neighbor you like. It's not the other neighbor. You have a neighbor that you like, and they come to you because Civil War II is just broken out, or there's boots on the ground in America, and they come knock on your door. Mike, I don't know what to do. I'm so scared. Can my family stay with you because I know that you're armed and you can protect us? What's your response? Either one of you. Or both of you.
That's tough.
Okay, so
That is
for
a
me,
tough
for me, I know for a fact, and I'm not going to say where I live, but my neighbor to the east of me and my neighbor to the south of me, they're both armed. Without a doubt, I know. But I do know that my neighbors across the street, my daughter's friend, her family, though they're not anti-gun, they don't own any, and nor would they ever, because they feel like their money is better spent on other things. And that's fine. That's their money. That's their house. But I have a hard time thinking if they came to my door, and regardless of how many I do or don't have, if they came to my door and said, "Oh my goodness, we're so scared. Can we stay with you? Can we use yours to protect us?" I genuinely feel like I would say, "I've tried to talk to you enough times about this, and you've ignored me enough times about this that, sorry."
Well, you're kind of answering the same thing that Sapper's asking down there. And he's right. And my trepidation, I've been military. Everyone knows that. I've been Marines, got some training, maintained some status of that. So I look at them as like, okay, if we're in that kind of situation, well, it's a matter of, okay, preservation. Who's got the skills that I don't have to complement me because I'm adding a risk to me and those that I am protecting already. And do I trust Joe Bumble down the street who never held a gun in his life and most likely is not going to be any use to me whatsoever? I'm better off
You know what?
double gun it than try and give him one and see
That
what
is a damn fair point, because let's take said neighbor, little girl's friend's family. He is from England and probably in his lifetime has shot a gun less than 10 times. But he is a world-class mechanic and can fix anything. Now, I grew up in the mechanics field. Am I a mechanic? No. I'm a human mechanic. I work on people. I'm the human side of the mechanical industry, and I don't want to toot my own horn, but I'm damn good at it. I've done it for a long time. But if something breaks down of mine and I need somebody, he's probably somebody I want to have on my side. So maybe I would let him in.
So, well,
You
let's-
hand me magazines, I'll just keep going.
let's look at some real world examples.
Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely.
So Sapper does bring up some good questions here.
Okay.
Ukraine. Okay. You've got a highly trained Russian military force bearing down on Ukraine.
Yeah.
Okay. You've got a highly resolved civilian force, which may not have necessarily training, but they've got numbers.
Yeah.
Look how well they're holding off Russian forces.
Yeah. And
Okay.
Russia is doing better
So-
than the news media is putting out there because they are taking land. And
They
they're
are
being
taking land, but
and they're
it's
being
it's
slowed
also been a whole lot slower though than what they were predicting.
They
Yeah.
were expecting a sweep.
Okay, so do they have the? Yes, you do need. Let's go back to my point before I get sidetracked. Okay, just because they may not necessarily have ever fired a gun, which I'm assuming that a lot of people in Ukraine, because of the Ukrainian gun laws, have never fired a weapon. You can familiarize somebody pretty quickly with a firearm, okay, and get it so that they can be safe and can somewhat hit what they're aiming at. I mean, they might not be highly accurate, but they might be able to at least cause some wounds, especially when you've got a huge force bearing down on you. Okay.
making them put their heads down. Yeah.
I mean, it's one thing to try to hit a single person, do a headshot on a single person at 1,000 yards versus trying to hit one person out of 300 people that are charging you at 50 yards.
Yeah. Yeah. That's
Okay.
true.
So you don't have to have exactly a very highly skilled individual to be able to hit that big of a mass coming at you. Where, like I said, if you're trying to take out a single target at 1,500 yards, yeah, that's a different skill set, obviously. So we need to take that into consideration when we're having this discussion. Okay. Even a very unskilled army can actually do a lot to defend against an invasion.
True.
Now, whether or not they're going to be able to completely stop it, that's up for debate. Honestly, I don't think they would be able to, but they can make it so it's a lot more costly, for sure.
Yeah. Let's slow them down. But I think, and for people who are watching this, and if you're not a gun owner, if you've never held a gun like your neighbor who's from England, and I understand England, that's not part of their culture, but they should really think and say, if you even think there's a 1% chance of what we're talking about happening, you might want to go out to the gun range, talk to your so many buddies who own a firearm, get a little bit of proficiency, because God forbid that 1% happens and we get into a bad situation in America. You want to be able to knock on the door, and I don't have to make that decision of how valuable are you. I'd rather have the choice of, yeah, I can trust you. Come on in.
Mhm. Well, and that along with what we're dealing with right now is absolutely a consideration and a scary thought. But let's step back to the George Floyd protests again. We talked about a minute ago, and when they went to the streets and they were trying to burn down all of our major cities, what did they say was coming next? Let's go to the suburbs, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
And to think that in that same situation where forget about being under attack by a foreign power, worrying about being under attack by your neighbors. Well, neighbors, I say, but people from these, I live in the third or fourth biggest county in Utah, and not that that's saying much because there's about 5 big ones, and the rest don't even make up one of those. But in the county I live in, and there was that point where they kept saying, we're coming to the suburbs, we're coming to the suburbs. And it was like, I wasn't even worried about, a Russian or a Chinese superpower. I was worried about the guys from Salt Lake. And the same thing goes. I would rather have him on my side, even though there's some posters in his front yard that might make you think otherwise. I'd rather have him on my side. And I think people don't need to worry about once this is over, and I hope this goes over without incident, and I hope we all make it through this without incident, and there's never boots on the ground here. But again, once we get through this, how far are we going to fall off the other side?
Well, that is one thing we always need to consider. Okay. And we need to look again, history is very telling on this. And one of the things that we've always kind of seen through history is whenever we do have some major event, some major crisis happens in our history, government always ends up expanding its powers.
Sadly, yes.
Without a doubt. I mean, you can look at any event that we've had in our 240 some odd years that we've been in existence. No matter what event we look at, catastrophic, the government has always expanded its powers every time.
Yep.
And that's been bad, but that fear, and we've seen that the last 2 years have been a great example of fear has overruled thought. People stop asking questions about their politicians. They stop asking about their rights, and they just said, protect me. The first person to protect you is you. Part of that is knowing your rights, and another part of that is being able to defend yourself. Right now there are people who I have friends right now, and they have chickens, they're getting pigs, they're planting food. They started doing this 6 months ago, maybe even a year ago, some of them, not because of what the food shortage we know is coming now. They were doing it ahead of time just because the prices were going up, and now they're prepared. Again, they did their part of their due diligence to protect themselves was, okay, we're going to use the land we have to be able to feed ourselves. So people should take this as I like to look at it as a preparation. I hope you'll never ever need to consider any of these things. You'll never have to deal with any of this, but better to be ready and not need it than to need it and go, I have no time. Well, I have no opportunity.
Well, go ahead, Mike.
Marshall. Let's look at, a lot of people look at preppers as being these conspiracy theorists, crazies that, okay, let's look at reality versus what they're doing. Okay. We have predicted food shortages coming up,
Absolutely.
but these preppers have all these food stores.
Mhm.
We've got gas prices that are astronomical. A lot of
And
these
going higher.
preppers have already put aside lots of fuel
Mhm.
or have alternative sources for providing for their energy needs. We have catastrophic inflation right now. A lot of these preppers had already got a lot of this stuff before prices started going up. Okay. They've got tons of ammo. They've got guns. They've got food. They've got water supplies. They've got energy sources. They've got shelter. All the stuff that are needed for life to go on, they've already stockpiled. So
Right.
really, even if they are conspiracy theorists, the fact that they are prepared for what's going on now seems to kind of indicate that maybe we need to start taking a page out of their books and start looking seriously about doing that for ourselves.
There's an old joke about that. There's an old joke that goes, just because I'm paranoid doesn't mean I'm wrong.
Exactly.
Right.
Well, we can look at other
there-
instances. Look at what happened during Katrina.
Yeah.
Okay, people that were during Katrina, people that were prepared fared a lot better than those that weren't. And how long did it take for the government to come in there and actually be able to help people?
To get
Aren't
water
they
into a
still
stadium.
fixing shit?
What's that?
Yes.
They're still fixing stuff in Katrina.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, they're still fixing stuff up here from Irene.
So, but these preppers, as they're being called, and these extremists, and they're just trying to simply plan for basic human needs when not if but when it hits the fan. And those are the people who people are going to run to and say, "Oh my gosh, thank goodness you prepared. Take us in." And they're going to say, "You made fun of us. Get out of here. Go away." And just like Sapper says here is he'd rather fight armies like the Taliban and ISIS and Al Qaeda, and rather than seeing what's going to happen when places like Westchester or New York City runs out of food and fuel. And he's 100% right. People think it's bad now. I don't know if in anybody who's alive right now's lifetime has seen what a true shortage, an absolute shortage looks like of food and fuel. And it's happened in other countries, but and maybe I'm wrong, but I don't know if there's anybody here who's experienced what happens when the food and the fuel actually do run out. Forget about your $5, $6, $7, $8, $9 a gallon. When there are no gallons left to buy, that's when the wolves will come out.
We saw that in the late
1929.
70s.
Okay.
Okay. We didn't see
Sorry,
so
I
much
was only
with
born in
food, but we
87.
did see it with fuel.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. We saw gas stations across the country. Now, fortunately, I lived in an area where we didn't see it, but in places like California,
New York City.
in New York, in Florida, and many other places, we saw what it was like when fuel started running out. People were not able to get fuel. They started rationing based upon what digit your license plate ended on what days you could actually get fuel.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Even in nuts.
And
Even
it
in
was, it was a daily occurrence. Gas stations would run, they had so much and they ran out of fuel on a daily basis.
I remember that.
I'm afraid we're going to see that again here in the not too distant future because of policies that have been put in place by our current administration.
Well, what I'm afraid of is, one, we're going to see that, but two, based off of the events of the last 2 years, America and its citizens are so volatile right now. What will happen when that happens? I'm sure it was a scary thing in the 70s, and again, I can't say how it was. I wasn't there to attest to it, but the American state right now, and the volatility of America, what's going to happen when it actually runs out here will be something to behold.
Well, it wasn't as scary in the 70s as I remember it because we weren't as dependent on electricity and electronics. And most people were more handy and more capable individually. So it didn't devastate. We didn't have cell phones that would drop off. We didn't have computers that were going to end. You listen to the radio, you could have hand cranked radios. People were more likely to be, you had more people who were carpenters, electricians, machinists that were around both in your neighborhood and also maybe in your family. So it wasn't as, it was inconvenient and aggravating, but it wasn't scary. And there was also food.
It wasn't devastating.
Yeah. It was just bad.
Well, that's what I mean. It was an inconvenience then. Now it will be insanity.
Now it will be because we have a culture right now where people, again, they don't know their rights. They're reliant on a government that's promised, we'll take care of you, even though we see repeatedly the government doesn't because it can't be everywhere. And we have people who don't have the skills to be able to make up that difference, whether that be firearms or first aid or putting together anything. And when you're combining those things at the same time that we have such major instability around the world, I mean, think about it. This is how scary it is. And this is part of my fear of the 3-region war, not World War III, but 3-region war, is the first thing that you'll see that'll tell us that we're about to have that scenario happen. China stops making stuff for America. And they'll do it as a slowdown. Oh, we can't get out all the goods you need. And our supply system, because we're not manufacturing anymore, thank you, Obama, we are a service economy now. So we get our stuff, a good portion, I believe it's 65, 70% of our goods are coming from overseas. China is, I think, 30 to 40% of that, if I remember correctly. So if they slow down that production of goods that we don't make anymore, and will take us at least 2 years to ramp up significantly to make up for all of the goods that they're currently making, that's going to hit us kind of like what we just were going through and we still are going through. And then you add on top of that, we don't have enough food and we don't have enough energy. And now we have a very weak, disorganized, angry American populace at the same time that someone decides to say, hey, let me take my shot. Now, am I saying a worst case scenario? Absolutely, I am. And do I think it's going to happen? I would hope not. But plan for the worst, live through the better. Don't wait for it to be that bad. Take the opportunities we have now. Learn what your rights are. Make our government as efficient and effective as it can be, and fill in the gaps with your own capabilities. Because again, strong leaders are the first line of defense. The last line of defense is a strong America, strong Americans.
Well, and Sapper brings up a good point. Okay, in reverse, there are already, in a lot of ways, that's already happening. There's a lot of ships that were returning, and this wasn't happening just recently. This is happening all the way through. That's why we have such huge trade deficits between China, for one, and several other countries. is because it wasn't worth China to import products from America. So it was actually less expensive for them to return the ships empty than it was to load them with goods that the Chinese really didn't need anyway.
Yeah.
Okay. China has actually set itself up very, very well in order to survive complete isolation.
Yeah.
Russia's learning quick.
Exactly. And we need to, that's the way we used to be. That's what actually made us one of the powers in the world, was our ability to be able to provide for ourselves.
Absolutely. So
And
go ahead.
And through that ability of being able to provide for ourselves, we're also able to provide for our allies. We've lost those capabilities.
And suppress them.
And
Suppress them.
well, yeah, we've suppressed them.
Mhm.
We have gotten ourselves to the point where we become too complacent in our dominance, so to speak. And we don't realize what many of our policies have done. And it wasn't just the Obama, okay? It wasn't,
Sure.
I mean, it started way, way, way before that.
Sure.
Okay, we can look back at things that Ford put in place. We can look at things Nixon put in place. Even going back to Kennedy, and even prior to that, that have been put in place that got us, okay. For example, many of the things that Carter did got us reliant upon foreign oil versus being self-sufficient and relying on our own oil. You had stuff that was put in place by Reagan that got us dependent upon foreign goods and foreign services. That was continued under Bush Sr. And then it was expanded upon under Clinton. And we've gotten to this point where we've worked so hard at becoming such a globalist citizen that we've lost sight of our independence and what it actually takes for us to actually be able to be isolated and still be a dominant force in the geopolitical scale regions. And if we ever did get into a situation, and it very easily could happen, even though we do have some strong allies out there, where we are totally isolated. We do have two vast oceans that are on each side of us. We've got a somewhat strong ally to our north, but it really would not be that hard to isolate the United States from the rest of the world.
So
I got to go again for just a second.
Okay. I'm actually gonna I'm gonna sign out, but I need to recap on a few things that we've talked about tonight.
Sure.
We'll kind of start from the beginning here, and this is for people who weren't here from the beginning or haven't watched this from the beginning. First, education. So we need to make sure that we're choosing education for our children, and we can no longer rely on the public school systems to educate our children. We've proved that with myself, and we've proved that with my daughter Kirsten earlier in the chat. There are things that you're never going to learn in school anymore, things that the schools are going to intentionally avoid teaching you because they know that that's not going to fit their agenda. There are plenty of programs out there right now, people like the Tuttle Twins we talked about a little bit, and so many other programs that you can get your kids in and make sure that they're educated, but make sure that you're educated yourself as well on these things. It's important that we are, because we can't pass that knowledge on if we don't understand it ourselves. Another big point is we talked about the kind of modern downfall on skill set in America, and we talked about how it's not gone, but it is fading quickly. And to make sure that take some time, everyone has a little extra time. Pick up a trade, pick up something that can make yourself a little bit more useful. You train with it, let alone anything else, even if it's only for your own protection. And then some other things that we talked about is being useful to our neighbors and being useful to ourselves in the event that everything does get lost. And I've got to credit Michael for this, but community unification is key. No matter what happens, if we can get a little bit of community unification going, no matter where we end up or no matter what happens, we'll be able to build ourselves up a little bit more. And Mike Marshall has said that we can survive without government assistance if we can just unify as a community. And then, as Sapper has pointed out, it's not just enemies foreign. There's threats domestic, and Vass has pointed out there's threats domestic. We have people like, what's his name? Beto O'Rourke, who have blatantly said, yes, I know, who have blatantly said things like, hell yes, we're coming for your weapons, AR-15s, AK-47s, but it's not the words that he used. It was the point that he's not afraid anymore. He's not afraid to say, yeah, we're coming for you and we're going to do it. And I just want to, again, thank people like Mike Marshall, Vass, Frank, who hasn't joined us tonight, for the education I've gained over the years with this and things like that. But I want to say, if I can take away one thing from tonight and share one thing from tonight, and I feel like I'm going to catch it on eventually with Mike and Frank, is education over indoctrination.
Yep.
Forget about the stuff they're shoving down your throat. Go out and learn for yourself. And again, Mike, you missed it at first. I'm going to sign off, but I want to thank everyone who joined us, and I want to thank you guys, and I want to thank everyone who watches this and shares this, and just remind everybody that without each other, we're nothing, and we will not continue to grow. And we just need to take that extra little bit of time that we have, turn off the TV, and study up on what's going on in America, and realize that these are no longer empty threats. These are things that we need to be prepared for every single day. Yeah, Sapper, read.
Yeah. No, I agree with everything that you said, Jeremy, and I think it's vital for people to pay attention to what's going on. I read 22 different news sources, and not one of them is a major cable news network. 22 sources a day.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why people will sometimes notice, it's like, how do you know those numbers? How do you remember? Because I read a lot about our government. They put out a bill, I read the bill. I read I listen to what the Times of India, the Jerusalem Times. I listen to BBC, The Guardian, Sky News. That's just off the top of my head, just one or two. You got to be aware. You got to.
That brings an amazingly valid point. Don't just focus on what you're being force-fed here. Read the world news and see what people are saying from the outside. And I feel like this is just getting to an amazing point, but I do have to step out now. Again, thank you, everybody. I'm going to pin it to, I will pin this on the Liberty First Foundation, but it is education over indoctrination. Teach yourself and teach your family. Again, gentlemen, thank you. Good night. I cannot wait till next Friday. And there's a lot of stuff I want to bring to the table next Friday that I've been working on. I just don't have the information quite yet. But I'm going to sign out and say good night. Thank you both.
Thank you, Jeremy.
Thank you, Jeremy.
And daughter as well.
Night.
So It's interesting, Mike. And I know a lot of people will watch this, and I'm sure there's people who are saying, but I don't agree with that one point, or I don't agree with that one idea. And like, I've heard many people will tell me, well, no, Mike, it's World War III. It's not 3 regional wars. You know what? It's not about being perfect. It's not about being every single point. It's about the discussion overall. It's, I've said it several times. Jeremy was saying it. You've said it yourself, Mike. Education, knowledge about our rights, holding our elected officials accountable, and then making up that difference with our own skills and being prepared for ourselves when we put all those things together. Because I think that overwhelmingly, we've talked about Second Amendment, First Amendment, all these different things. I think overwhelmingly, that's the theme that we've been talking about is raise yourself up. That raises America up. We all boats float in a rising tide. I think that's a great way of also looking at it and summing it up.
Well, any society is the sum of any society is greater than the value of its parts. Or the sum is always greater than the. I know what I'm trying to say, but I can't come up with words right now.
I get it. Yeah, the sum is always greater than the individual parts.
Exactly. And Jeremy was touching on community unification.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and I do agree. We need to start bringing our communities back together. If for nothing else, to be better equipped to handle whenever a natural disaster strikes.
I've been through a few of those.
We are our own first responders. Yeah, some is always greater than the whole. We need to bring our communities together so that we can actually be able to respond to whatever comes our way. Okay, and we can't do that by being divisive. We can't do that by putting ourselves in these little boxes and saying, I'm a conservative, so I don't associate with liberals. Okay, I mean, come on. We look at countless things that are happening. We had a ton of tornadoes happen in the South over the last few weeks. We're going to be coming into hurricane season in the fall. We've got tornadoes are going to be happening. We've got flooding that's going to be happening. Okay, if our communities are unified, then our communities can respond to these incidents. And we can't just rely on our volunteer fire departments. We can't rely on our law enforcement. We can't rely on all these different services, okay? Because they're going to have their hands full whenever something like that, whenever an event like that happens. These agencies are already overburdened. So let's start bringing our communities together so that we can respond to whatever these events are as a community and not have to rely on our volunteer firefighters, our law enforcement, our the Red Cross coming in whenever they get there, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Those are some things that we can do to help make our communities better and to be able to withstand whatever happens. And in the process, come up with ways to work in your community to help set up the defenses in that community because you never know what could happen. Okay, we've had countless Hollywood stories from aliens invading us to Red Dawn, where North Korea
I like
invaded
that one.
us. I
The
mean,
original.
there's a ton of scenarios, and there's scenarios that you can look at even beyond what's been featured on the screen to what happens if let's say, okay, one of the big thing is right now domestic terrorism is a huge problem in this country. Well, if our communities are organized and actually unified together, we can respond to a domestic terrorist.
And we've seen
Okay,
that happen.
exactly. And yes, I totally agree with what Zapper's saying. We need to start being Americans, not Democrat, not Republican, not liberal, not conservative. Okay, we need to start being communities again. Okay, yeah, communities are going to have their differences of opinions, but that doesn't mean we can't come together for the common good.
No, I always
Okay.
like to say. No,
Oh.
I'm sorry. I didn't mean to cut you off. I was just going to say, I've always believed that no one individual we're all human. No one has all the answers. No one is completely correct. When we come together, you get a bunch of voices, you get a bunch of people working together. Together, we figure out something a whole lot better than any one person figures it out.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Could not agree more with that. And I don't have all the answers. I know Michael doesn't have all the answers. None of us do. But we each know small parts. And we bring all those parts together, we come up with a plan that's actually pretty good. But we can't do it if we continue to isolate and allow ourselves to be divided. So quit listening to political rhetoric and start looking at your neighbors and saying, hey, what are we going to do if something like this happens?
Well, I got to
Start working on plans like that.
I got to say, I do political rhetoric. That's my thing. But you're right. I would rather not have to be able to do it. I'd rather not have to have those conversations because everyone goes, yeah, Mike, we already know that. And we already agree on that, or at least mostly agree.
I'm going to get into a little bit of my background, and I know we're running along. I mean, we're over 2 hours now, and we need to actually start shutting this down a little bit.
Yeah.
But before that, I want to get into a little of my background. I've lived in 16 different states, so I've lived in a lot of different communities, and I've seen the resiliency that some communities have over others. I mean, in 1993, I think it was. Iowa had horrendous flooding that occurred there. Because the communities there were able to come together, they were actually able to rebuild. And the communities were able to actually work together to make it so that that flooding didn't impact them as severely as it would have impacted other areas because they had strong knit communities. But you have other places where they don't have strong knit communities and everything just falls apart. Okay. We need to quit waiting until disaster strikes before we come together. We need to start coming together now.
Yeah.
Okay. And I'm getting preachy and all this. And maybe it's as I get older, I start realizing that we are allowing ourselves to be actually Zappa brings up some good points. We can find an answer if we start having conversations instead of talking at each other, and that's the problem with both sides seeming to be hijacked by the extremes of both sides.
Yes.
I absolutely agree. And that's why I'm not a political party supporter. I don't agree with political parties. I believe that the entire intent and purpose of political parties is to create division.
There I would disagree with you a little bit, but that's okay. We can, you know what? But that's all right. And it's not that I hate that line. We'll agree to disagree. No, we just disagree, and that's fine because, again, it comes back to, but we can still find common ground.
Well, exactly. We can. Okay, and I do agree that right now, I do believe that right now, especially today, our political parties set out to do nothing more than divide us more.
Yeah, that I agree with. Absolutely. Yes.
Okay, and I don't agree that that was necessarily the way it was always, but that is what is happening now. And that is their purpose, is to keep us divided. Because the more they keep us divided, the more power they are able to consume and take from us. And the only way that we can stop that is literally by starting to come together. So,
I agree.
with that, I do think that we need to have more discussions about bringing our communities together. Start working in our communities to build systematic resource or systems to respond to whatever may happen in our communities. Because it's going to take more than just a volunteer fire department. It's going to take more than your sheriff's department and your police department to be able to handle a large scale crisis.
Yeah.
Okay. And hopefully you never have to use those. But truth is, at some point, all communities face a large scale crisis. And the communities that are united and come together are able to stand against that and able to rise above that. And the ones that don't, they end up perishing. So it's time for us to start looking at that. Okay,
You're right.
Even with this pandemic that we are still kind of in. If our communities would have been more organized and more together, we could have handled it a whole lot better and a whole lot differently.
Oh yeah.
So,
Well, I know we're wrapping things up. I do want to mention to everyone again, don't be afraid. One of the things I want to also mention to everyone, don't be afraid to speak up. Don't be afraid of being unpersoned and being stripped of the social media. And this is somewhat personal to me because we started with this, and I want to bring it up again that I just had one of the media outlets, Discord, just ban me. Don't know why. Don't know what happened. I'm on, I don't know, 7, 8 social media platforms, and all the content is relatively exactly the same. And they wiped me off of Discord this evening. I don't know why. And you know what? It's okay. It doesn't matter. I got banned by YouTube about 2 weeks ago, shut down for a week. It's okay. I've been attacked by Disney and Showtime to try and shut me down. It's okay. Because I'm still speaking publicly, like here. And when I can't speak here, I'm still speaking in my community. And that's why I'm doing a protest, which may be the reason why I got shut down, is because I'm doing a protest in my of my local college because of CRT. But the thing is, don't be afraid. Because the worst thing that could happen to you isn't not being on Facebook anymore, or not being on Discord anymore, or YouTube, or whatever medium that you like to use. Don't be afraid of that. What you should be more afraid of is not being able to speak, not being able to help your community. Because when you help your community, you help yourself. Not being able to stand up for what you believe in. Because if you can stand up for what you believe in, you can stand up with others. It's all together. And if they got us scared, oh, I can't be on internet anymore. You know what? I lived the first, 30 years of my life. We didn't have an internet. We didn't have cell phones. Trust me, you will survive without it. We did it for so many hundreds of years before, and most recently in my lifetime. So it's not even that ancient an idea. It's my lifetime, 54. You can live without this stuff. Don't let that stop you from saying, hey, I have an idea. I have a point of view. I think this will help make my community better and make yourself better. Don't let that stop you ever.
I agree. Okay. And I agree that even if you are the only voice and every other voice opposes you, don't let your voice be silenced. Because that single voice can work to start change.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
We are too concerned with appearances, and we need to start being less concerned with how things appear and start being a lot more concerned about what we're giving up. And until we start realizing that those that are working to divide us and what that is actually costing us, personally and also as a whole, we need to start uniting again. We need to start coming back together. Plain and simple.
Yep.
Division is doing nothing. It's hurting us. And we are the only ones who can fix it.
I agree.
Okay. And I'm not talking about we as in Mike and myself. I'm talking about we as in the American people. Until we quit allowing ourselves to be divided and we start saying, hey, enough. We are Americans. Regardless of whether you're Republican, Democrat, Independent, regardless of whether you're conservative, moderate, liberal, I don't care. Okay, until we start saying that, okay, until we start saying, I don't care who you are. I want to get to know you as a person. And I want us to find ways that we can work together to make our community better. Only then can we change.
Yeah.
Okay. With that, I'm going to go ahead and sign us off. I
All
want
right.
to thank everybody that was watching tonight. Sapper, I want to thank you especially for all your comments and input that you had on the conversation. You did add a lot of relevant stuff to the discussion, and I appreciate that. We will be doing this again next Friday. We will start our live service right around 9 o'clock or 9-ish Eastern time. I invite you guys to check out our website at l1f.us. Also find us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter under the Liberty First Foundation. And we look forward to you guys joining in the conversation in the future. Thank you very much. And with that, we'll say good night.
Night, everyone.